Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today, I am really thrilled for the guest that I get to have a conversation with on our podcast today. We have Assemblymember Heath Flora, who is also currently the Assembly Republican leader, and we'll be having a conversation with him today about just the current legislative landscape, how affordability is a priority in California, and just to learn a little bit about him. Because for those of you who don't know, he will be our keynote speaker for Day at the Capitol, May 6th in Sacramento. So personally, I'm very excited to get to know him a little bit more before his keynote session. So without further ado, Assemblymember Heath Flora, or just Heath, thank you for joining us today and taking the time.
No, it's awesome to be here. Appreciate the invite. Looking forward to it.
I will say that personally I was very intrigued when I learned you're super well-rounded from, having experience in the agriculture space to being part of a family-owned small business and then also being a volunteer firefighter. That's super cool. Could you just share for those who may not know you right now a little bit about you and your background and how you ended up in public service?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my family came from North Dakota in 1923 to the west side of Stanislaus County. I'm in the Modesto area. Grew up in an ag family and never really thought that I was going to get involved in politics right out of before I graduated high school. I started out as an explorer with Salida Fire Department and then became a volunteer with them. I went through medic school, got hired with Cal Fire, worked for a few summers there, but I always thought I was just going to be a firefighter. Former Senator Anthony Cannella actually was the one. We were having dinner up here in Sacramento, and he's like, "Hey, you get along with everybody. You get on with labor groups, and you're a small business guy. Like, you should run for office." And so that was sort of the start of it. I never really thought anything of it. My original race was 4 Republicans and 2 Democrats, and I was the only guy that had no political experience. And so it was a lot of fun to come up here and learn and just really represent the Central Valley. And understanding that a lot of our issues in the Valley are not partisan issues; they're just very regional. And so really trying to work with our colleagues to get some of those things done. So it's been a great experience, and it's been a decade now. I've got one last election coming up, which is crazy to think it's been that long, but it's been a lot of fun. It's been a huge privilege.
I mean, with that well-rounded background, I feel like it does help, right, to for you to understand your constituents and know what kind of policy needs to get passed in Sacramento. So I'm curious, as we're in the middle of the legislative, not really the middle, but definitely we're in full swing now with the legislative session. How would you describe the overall landscape in Sacramento right now? How is it feeling in the building?
It's pretty challenging right now. I think there's a lot of emotions going into an election year, both on the Dem and Republican side. It's just, Governor Newsom, we have a governor that's terming out this year. So the governor's race is heating up. So it is a challenging dynamic right now. But I do think that there's a lot of positive, things that are happening. I really do. I think there's a lot of light being shown on affordability issues as it relates to, obviously fuel prices and all of those things. And so that's encouraging to me because a lot of folks are hearing about it back home and they needed to. And so we're starting to see some of that movement, which is exciting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's when fuel prices rise, I think most consumers their only interaction is at the gas pump. But it's the understanding of how upstream that affects everything across the board. And educating our consumers that way. And I'm sure with your tie to agriculture as well, there's kind of that intersectionality where you do see how fuel prices affect everything, not just how you feel up at the pump, but also how things affect or how the costs are affected in the supply chain. Was there that correlation when you're working in agriculture as a farmer and all that with the equipment that you see how fuel has that relation with basically across industry relationship?
Obviously, personally, we see it all the time. I think what's interesting is trying to get our Bay Area and LA colleagues to understand that. We're not just talking about electrifying, passenger vehicles. We're not talking about those things when we talk about fuel prices. We're actually talking about the holistic approach of, if it costs a farmer more to produce a crop, get it to the marketplace, all those costs are being passed down. And for a long time, our colleagues didn't see that, didn't understand that. And I think that's what they're starting to realize now is that is not just like passenger vehicles that we're concerned about. It's everything. And so when we go back to this whole holistic affordability approach, like we're talking about all of those issues. So many of our colleagues, constituents are, dual working families if they're lucky enough to have both parents in the home, right? And so I think that's really important for people to understand it. it's not just passenger vehicles that we're talking about. I mean, it really is an affordability crisis in California.
And in your time at the legislature, do you feel like, just curious if affordability has ever been such a top priority? I mean, it always is a priority, but is it more so in the past few years?
100%. Absolutely is. And that's encouraging. And it's kind of is unfortunate that it has to get so bad. But even last year, we weren't seeing really any input from the Democratic side to address it. You know, they would talk about it, but we'd never really do anything. We're seeing it differently now. A lot of the new Democrats that came in are very good, and they're not wanting to deal with this. They think it's crazy. You know, nobody is wanting to really go back to, you know, the 1940s where, you know, was no regulations. But what we are talking about, there's a time and a place and at what cost to get there. And I think that's the conversation that we're having now. So often in Sacramento, we let perfect be the enemy of good. You know, there's a lot of other technologies out there, whether it's ethanol 85 or, you know, E15 or just these other, you know, type of blends that can reduce, you know, greenhouse gas emissions, which is what they care deeply about, but also not just destroy everybody's, you know, ability to have an expendable income.
Right. I mean, it's the point is to lead with common sense, practical solutions that don't sacrifice affordability.
Yeah. I would hope. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you brought up some fuel options just now, E15, 85. And I know there are some questions that were sent to you, so I might jump around here, but you are a co-author of AB 2046, which is a CFCA-sponsored bill. For those who are listening who might not know anything about the bill, essentially right now in California is the only state that doesn't allow legal sale of conversion kits. And so what this would do is to allow California drivers to basically have more fuel options to choose from. You know, you can purchase a conversion kit so that you can fill up on either E85 or regular gasoline, and you can, you know, flip back and forth. Heath, can you talk a little bit about your thoughts, just your thoughts around this bill?
Yeah, I wish we could have got done last year. I mean, we got E15 last year, and that was a hurdle. But this one seems to be in a lot better place, and I'm excited about that. It was kind of funny when we were running, because I was the co-author of the ethanol bill, or E15, last year as well. And when they started coming in to talk about ethanol, you know, 85, it was a little bit late in the game. And it was just something that we're just going to have to kind of start over again next year. But it was interesting because we got that through, and there's not nearly the pushback on this as there was last year. I think we were able to beat back some of the concerns potentially, but it has not been really a big issue so far this year. So I'm encouraged by that.
That is encouraging. That is good news. That is good news to hear. And I know that beginning of this week was when it passed out of committee, which is great news, and it's moved over to appropriations. I'm just curious. This just got me thinking, if you can share the vehicle that you drive, what is your current vehicle of choice?
The current truck is a Dodge TRX.
Okay, so, does that fuel up on diesel or is it regular gasoline?
It's regular, it's premium gas, a little over 700 horsepower, is a dual supercharged, and so I'm a big supporter of the gasoline industry right now. I think on a good day, I get about 12 miles to a gallon. Yeah, it is not the most fuel efficient vehicle in the world, but it has been an amazing vehicle, so I love it.
Yes, and well, I mean, that's always I feel like the balance, right, of the mileage side of things, but also do you just love that you get to drive your vehicle to work, all those things.
It's like my truck, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, then for AB 2046, I would love to dig your brain a little bit when you're looking, because you also talk about the E15 bill from last year. When you're looking at bills like this, what factors matter to you most as a legislator? Because, you know, you have your constituents, like you brought up earlier, that you have to account for as well. Yeah, what kind of goes through your mind when you consider bills like that?
I mean, honestly, does it benefit or affect in a negative way my constituents? It's really, I'm one of those things, like for me, just on any piece of legislation, in reality, is it go against like my own personal beliefs. So it's like that, constituents, and then party, right? That's sort of how I do it. Like, so, I mean, if it doesn't hurt my constituents, then I'm usually good with it. I'm good with partnering with my Democratic colleagues. You know, it doesn't really matter what it is. If it has a problem, you know, or hurts the Central Valley, then I'm usually going to be opposed to it. And there's not, I mean, and the problem with Sacramento and legislation is not every bill is 100% good or 100% bad. And I think sometimes that what, you know, constituents and elected struggle with as well is like, what's that balance, right? Was there enough good in a piece of legislation versus bad? And I'll reference, cap and trade in 2017 was my first big bill. There's a lot in that bill that was really, really crappy. There was. There was just a lot in there that was not great. But there was one part that we negotiated with the governor's office was the farmer program, which allowed farmers to upgrade their tractors into more fuel efficient diesel burning tractors. And it was a hugely successful program with ARB. So that was kind of one of those balances, like those trade-offs. Like, is there enough good? And for me and my constituents in the Central Valley, like there was. And so, yeah, it's just sort of personally, constituents, and party third.
I like that, and that totally does make sense. And so on a broader scale, do you see bills like AB 30 from last year, AB 2046 right now? Do you see this as a part of a larger shift in California, of how California should think about fuel policy moving forward? Because you just talked about how it's never black and white. There's always that gray area. So are we dancing in that gray area, and do you see that being common moving forward?
I think we are. Interestingly enough, I was with the New Car Dealers Association yesterday on a panel, and this kind of got brought up as well. Um, yeah, I think we're moving that direction. I really do. It's never going to be as fast or as far as what I would probably want it to go. Um, but we also got to understand the state that we live in, right? They're still, hyper vigilant on environmental changes, and I'm not saying any of those things are wrong or you don't have the right to believe in all of that. But there's also science that matters as well. And I think, we do not live in a bubble in California.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can make all of these improvements all over the place, at whatever cost, but we're less than 1% of the issue worldwide. And so even as the fifth largest economy in the world, fourth largest economy in the world. So we just have to be honest about some of these things that we're doing. Again, nobody's wanting to say we're going back to no regulations. Like that's not
Mm-hmm.
what we're talking about at all. But what we are saying is let's relax. Let's take a moment. Other technologies that could come on the marketplace aren't on the marketplace just yet, right? And also, going back to ethanol 85, like that's perfect. I mean, hydrogen. Some of those conversations are being talked about, right? Um, let's have that conversation. Like, don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Right. And what you're talking about is, and CFCA, we've used this term over and over again, which we believe is still very important, is an all of the above energy approach.
Absolutely.
Not one size fits all. And I'm glad you brought up that statistic of what California really means in the broader scheme, and broader scheme as in globally, what we account for. And just to say as well is that our members who are gas station convenience store owners, fuel marketers, common carriers, so just appreciate you also being a co-author on something like AB 2046 that addresses the affordability, addresses the fuel crisis in California even just a little bit. I think conversations like that do matter.
Absolutely. I mean, every little bit helps, right? And I think that sometimes we get lost on that. We try to do the big things, and we can't even get the little things right, and then we try to expand on it, so it makes it even worse.
Yeah, do you feel like that is kind of the tough parts when it comes to talking about legislation in the building, is trying to balance the bigger picture with, I guess what it really is the bigger picture, the wants and desires up here with the feasibility of it, the details of how it's going to play out, implementation.
I think it's all those things, right? I think it's the bigger picture, but it's also, you can have a beautiful district on the Central Coast, right? And your issues are going to be very, very different than a beautiful district in the Central Valley, right? They just are. And sometimes, I mean, you look at the makeup of the state of California, over half of the makeup of the building comes out of LA and San Francisco. I mean, and so a lot of like my Democratic colleagues, those of us that represent the Central Valley, we all vote pretty close to the same on these issues. It's pretty, I mean, it really is. Because again, I go back to what I said earlier. Like a lot of our issues aren't partisan; they're regional, and so I think there's just this change of mindset. But what is cool though is over the next 2 years, the entire building is going to change over. We got 32 new members this year, and these are good Republican and Democratic members. They're good, and that's like putty. I mean, now's the time to get to them and get them to understand like what their issues are. And I really think there's an opportunity over this election cycle and even the next one after this to really make some progress here on these issues. Yeah, because the reality is the overwhelming majority of whether we want to admit it or not, the overwhelming majority of Governor Newsom's environmental policies have not particularly worked out well. They haven't. I'm not saying they haven't moved the needle a little bit, but not nearly enough for the cost of what we're paying for them. And I think we have to be honest about that.
I can speak from experience of the stories, I do hear from our members is that the affordability and cost of all those just makes it really tough, really, really tough. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, you do bring up a good point. And also thank you just for educating in the building. And I guess on that side too is, ahead of our day at the Capitol, or Advocacy Day, for industry professionals who are going into the building to educate lawmakers, what would you have any piece of advice for how they should lead with their story to really help the education piece hit home?
Don't make it about their story. Make it about their consumers, their customers. Make it all about, when I got elected in 2016, there was only 17 of us that had held private sector jobs. And so when you make it about what these regulations do to the business owner, they just look at you as a rich business owner. They don't care. There's no compassion there for the overwhelming majority of the building right now. But when you start talking about how these regulations force you to raise prices, which obviously go down to the consumer, how that affects the consumer, and even on the convenience store side of things, if you guys spend an extra $30 at the pump, you're not going to come into the convenience store and buy, food maybe for the family or some of the other things like that. So like making those connections, I think, is important. The more we can make it about our constituents, the better.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really, really good point. You're just making me think now too, because a lot of our members who are business owners, some of them work behind the counter, so they do interface with their customers a lot, know their faces, their names. So I do know their customers are just as important to them as, their business is.
For sure.
A little bit more about affordability, since it's top of mind for everyone right now, is from your perspective, could you share what meaningful progress with affordability would look like in California to you? That might be a very loaded question. I realize.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a loaded question.
Can I say I remember, I think it was maybe from earlier this year, there was something you said that was, it might be simple, but I think it was very realistic. It's about how affordability is a very complex thing because it's different folks from different regions with different backgrounds. And that's why affordability means something different to every single person. So that's also probably why this is such a loaded question.
Well, I think, when it comes to just like your issues, right? I think affordability is, the permitting process to get more fuel out of the ground in California, right? Get rid of all of our imports. Let's actually start drilling in the state of California. We have the safest, cleanest fuel in the world, and we're not allowed to get it, right? I think so. We talk about affordability. That's a good start. Like make sure CalGem is issuing permits so our refiners can actually get the product, to their refiners to get to all of you. I think that's a huge cost. And obviously, housing affordability is a huge issue as well. But really, it all to me starts with the fuel prices. Everything is connected to that. It's not hard to really draw parallels, whether it's vacations, where families go to vacation or not go on vacation, or how far they go, or are they going to put food on the table, or are they going to fill up and go to work, right? I think there's just these kind of conversations that are starting to be talked about. So I think for me, there's a lot of things we could do in the natural resources side of things to really open up affordability, and it's really reducing some of the bureaucratic red tape, get some permits issued, get the air board off our backs in a lot of ways, and then we can, start opening up things again.
Yeah, it's the what you're talking about is the bigger picture approach. How at every step of the way, how can we make it a little bit better so that when it gets to the end user, the consumer, essentially, it's a little bit easier to swallow down and pay the bill.
Yeah, if you're in Marin County, you're driving a Tesla, you don't care that electricity is going up because you're not running your AC or your heater that much, right? You're in Marin County. You don't care about fuel prices because you're not, buying fuel. And so, I think the only way to get to some of those people is the grocery costs, right? And And again, usually if you're living in those areas, you're usually on the upper end of the middle class spectrum or high earners, and so it just means different things to different people for sure.
Right. And if you live in the rural area, you're kind of farther from everything. It really falls down to your vehicle as being your
Like,
legs.
it's your lifeline.
Yeah,
Yeah,
your lifeline. Hmm.
yeah. Mass transit's not a thing in Modesto. It's just not.
And so it comes down to, are you going to bike for hours and hours and hours just to get to work? I don't know if some
Right.
people are, they might be.
Yeah,
But those are the people I personally think of when we talk about affordability.
absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, I would also like to ask, with how things are, we're about, 3, 4 months into the legislative session right now. Are you, maybe even during your term, all your terms in the building, do you notice any shifts or trends this year that stand out compared to previous years? I know we've talked about affordability a lot. So is it that, or are there other trends that are kind of patterns that are happening with policy?
Yeah, I think public safety is coming back around. Under the last few years of Governor Brown, and then certainly under Governor Newsom's tenure, um, we got pretty laxed on public safety issues. Petty theft, home invasion, like those types of things. We're not prosecuting. Obviously, the fentanyl issue, we raised a big stink about that last year. So I would think crime is becoming a much more palpable conversation. For a long time, one of my former colleagues who was no longer in the building was the chair of public safety. And if there was anything even slightly, law enforcement, pro law enforcement, it would die.
Mm,
Anything that could put, somebody in jail, it would die. Um, Nick Schultz is a new colleague who's a new current chair of public safety, and he is significantly better. So that's encouraging as well. So yeah, I think affordability, public safety issues, and then the other big trend we're seeing right now, which I'm excited about, is the fraud and abuse stuff. I don't know if people have been following. I think we're April 7th when we're recording this, but over the last week, the hospice care in LA County, the fraud that's going on there with Medi-Cal, uh,
mm,
and some of these reimbursement rates, and these guys are making hundreds of millions of dollars off of fraud. There seems to be a renewed, maybe not so much on my Democratic side, but if uh, the Attorney General is coming down and cracking down, the governor is having to start speak out about it as well. So I think that's a positive thing.
when it comes down to protecting, I mean, you talk about public safety, but in a way, this is kind of like public safety too, in a different way, protecting consumers. Yeah,
Well, it's
another
protecting our
trend.
taxpayers, right? I mean, we all pay a lot in taxes, which is one of the reasons California is so unaffordable. One of the reasons why we have a budget deficit right now is because of a lot of this fraud. I mean, can you imagine if we have 6-7 billion dollar deficit, 200 million dollars, like that can go a long ways for different programs that are actually helping people, that we're not just getting fraudulently. I think I forget the numbers, but in the last 6 years there was a 1,700% increase in hospice cares in LA County. Seventeen
Really?
hundred percent. Yeah, it's insane, and it's by like international like crime organizations. So yeah, it's just yeah, it's fascinating the scope of what is going to be coming out about some of this fraud and abuse stuff. So I'm encouraged by that. I am, and I think a lot of it goes back to my some of my Democratic colleagues. Like they're finally having the courage to say, you know what, this is actually not okay. Because I hate to say it, Republicans have been screaming about this for a while. This
Mm,
is something that we've known. Some woman, Ali Macedo, she's personally gone down and addressed it, or, walked the hallways trying to find these hospice care facilities. So I think there's a lot of synergy right now within the ability to address it, because the numbers are just getting very staggering.
yeah. Well, numbers aren't, that's not good news. But the synergy you're talking about, that is good news. I will personally say I've never heard a percentage added onto such a big number. 1,700% is insane. Um,
I think if you go on, there's an article on CBS News, if you Google it, that came out this morning. Yeah, if you're interested, yeah, there's some pretty good articles out there about it now.
yeah, I will have to read up on that a little bit more myself. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Because, I mean, it also is just talking about it whenever you can. That's also a form of education, is very important. So thank you for bringing it up.
Well,
Thank
it's
you. Yeah.
absolutely it's what educating viewers on, like, there's a lot of other things going on, right? That I think our constituents, wherever you're watching this from, need to know. There's a lot of things that go on in Sacramento that affect a lot of people. So yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Well, thank you. And also, I mean, talking about constituents, while we have you on this platform here, is there anything you would like to say or share? Any words of wisdom or anything of that sort as we continue into 2026 for constituents who might be wanting to advocate or voice their opinion, anything of that sort?
No, I just think wherever you're from, I mean, a relationship with your local elected official, your local Senate member, your senator, is really, really important. Again, like I really care about my district, and so every email that comes in or phone call that comes into the office that has a 209 area code, it means something to me. Now, if you're going to call and complain about something and you're from, LA, it's going to hold less weight. I'm happy to listen to you, but I'm not going to care about as much as what from somebody from my constituency cares about. So I think it is important to make sure your voices are heard, because our job is to represent all of you. And if we don't hear from you, it's hard to do that. So I think it's really important that constituents kind of re-engage in the political, and not in a negative way. I think people also need to understand that we are human beings, and we go through bad days and good days just like everybody else. I understand that if you get a elected official that might be kind of snotty or moody, or you didn't like, he or she is probably having a bad day. Give them another shot. Don't give up on them. Overwhelming majority of my colleagues really do try to serve with a good heart. We just disagree on maybe the policy side of it, but personally we all usually get along very well, and I think that's important. General Patton once said, and if everybody's getting along, if everybody's thinking alike, then somebody's not thinking. And I think that's a really interesting quote. If everybody's thinking alike, then somebody's not thinking. So it's okay to disagree. It's just how we disagree is how we get better at it.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up because at the end of the day, it can be frustrating. I think if you're not in the building, then also recognizing, like you said, everyone's human at the end of the day, and everyone is just trying to do the best thing, or they're just trying to do the thing that they think is best. I know we're coming up to the end of the episode here. I have a couple of rapid fire questions, if you don't mind. All right, and some of these are, it's just a few of them, but most of them they are all related to the fuels and convenience industry. So, very first question: what is your favorite go-to convenience store snack?
Jerky.
It's a good one. What's your preferred brand?
Oh man, Old Trappers, I think.
Okay, Old Trappers. I think I know which one you're talking about. Okay, coffee or energy drink or
Energy
soda?
drink. Energy drink all day long. The orange
Preferred brand?
monsters.
Orange. Oh, I do like the monsters. I've never tried the orange one though.
Peach is also good too.
You're not a Red Bull guy?
Not really, no. No.
They have
I've
these
just always been a
crazy
monster guy.
flavors.
I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
peach and monster. The thing with Red Bull is sugar. I don't like all the sugar. They do have sugar
You have
free.
those sugar-free though.
That's true. I know.
I would say give it a try. It's actually pretty good. The flavors are pretty bomb.
I'll have to try it.
You do. Okay, last but not least, on a road trip, podcast or playlist?
Ooh, podcast right now.
Can you share what's your top podcast right now?
The Sean Ryan Show.
Sean Ryan Show. Oh, that sounds familiar. Okay.
Yeah, he's a former Navy SEAL. Does a lot. He talks politics a lot too. Has a lot of great guests, but he's very much middle of the road. He's a good listen. So
Very nice. So good road trip listen. That's your recommendation.
yes. Although I will say, I was born in the 80s, so I'm kind of a 90s kid. On Spotify, 90s Bangers, the playlist 90s Bangers is pretty good. So if you
Is that one where Spotify makes a playlist for you, or it's like a set playlist?
Spotify will make it for you, but if you just put like 90s Bangers hit playlist, it comes up. It's pretty good. So yeah.
Well, guys, you heard it here first. Spotify 90s Bangers playlist. That could be summer 2026 playlist is going to be that
Bring
one.
it back. Bring it back.
I mean, there's that trend going around. 2016 is now coming back. So who's to say? Anything.
Exactly. Anything can happen. So funny.
Well, before we let you, is there anything else you'd like to share before we end our time here together?
No, I just appreciate the time and look forward to seeing you all on the 6th. So Look forward to it.
Yes, for anyone who isn't registered or you'd like to hear more from Heath, you will get to from his keynote session on May 6th in Sacramento at Day of the Capitol. So with that, thank you again, Heath, for joining us today. Really appreciate the time. And thank you all for listening as well. See you on the next one.
Have a great day.